Thank you so much. So I'm going to be presenting the work, mostly what I've been doing for my PhD thesis, and it's unsupervised alignment of natural language with video. But before I did some other tasks also, and most of my projects relate to the idea of the alignment and the unsupervised learning aspect of it. I mean, trying to use as less human supervision as possible. So let me start with a brief overview. Today we have huge amount of sequential structured data, and the main idea is that these data are often multimodal. There we have video, audio, text, motion, all these different types of data, and also it's structured data. It's a sequence. We cannot make any idea assumption. And often they're recorded with many different types of sensors, and they're not synchronized with one another. For example, I'm giving a talk now, and I have these slides which has text, and then I'm being video recorded, and then I have this Fitbit which is recording my heart rate, and then say if I want to just look at it, how I'm giving this presentation, which part I'm most excited about, then I want to take all these different sequential data on one computer and try to analyze it, and I will have to actually align them in time and try to look at their co-occurrence patterns before I can make some conclusion. So this is the main idea that I'm excited about, is trying to look at all these multimodal sequences, try to align them in time, and try to extract meaningful information from that. And even though I'm talking about like the very general multimodal data alignment problem, but the main work in my thesis I worked on is aligning natural language with video, and trying to do is with as less human supervision as possible. So let's start with the idea of connecting language with video. And there has been, or computer vision, and there has been lots of exciting applications in grounded language learning and other domains. We want to use it for human-robot interaction. Say if we give a command to a robot, we want it to ground it in its environment. And also, there has been a lot of work in multimedia captioning and indexing and search. If we can automatically describe a video or image by natural language, we can do search and retrieval much easily. And there can be many other exciting applications. But in my thesis, I've been looking at a different application, which is trying to model human activities in biological wet lab experiments. So basically, it's like a procedural task. People have step-by-step instructions, and they're following it, and we try to learn jointly from that. And let me give an overview of what a wet lab is. So wet lab is a desktop, benchtop environment, something that looks like this. This is very complex. There are lots of different bottles, containers, other equipments, tons of different stuffs. It's really messy. And normally, when some person is doing an experiment, for each experiment there is a protocol, which is a step-by-step instructions. And it's written in natural language. Even though all the biologists are following the same instruction, the results may vary widely depending on the personnel, because there are some specific ways of doing different tasks. Maybe for pipetting or when you're shaking, there are different ways of doing it correctly. And probably that knowledge is somewhere with a postdoc or a senior grad student, and when he leaves the lab, there is no way to reproduce that experiment. There was a nice and very interesting paper from Begley and Ellis in Nature 2012, where they tried to reproduce the results of some of the landmark Nature papers, and they couldn't reproduce many of them, and they concluded that there are many different problems, but one of the major problems was the incompleteness of the text protocol. And what we are trying to look at is, can we automatically figure out what are these hidden assumptions which are not explicitly mentioned in this protocol. And how we want to do that, we have this protocol text, which is the step-by-step instructions, and we have recorded multiple people carrying out these experiments. And given these, you can think of, it's very similar to the domain of recipe and cooking videos, right? Different people are following the same recipe, but here we have this protocol, and people are doing these experiments, and we are asking the question, can we learn these implicit assumptions or identify anomalies? So this is a very challenging task, and as a first step, what I'm trying to do is align each step or sentence with its corresponding video segment without human supervision, direct human supervision. So there has been a lot of exciting work in grounded language learning domain, and the idea is to try to connect video or image with the natural language. But most of these works were either supervised or semi-supervised. What I mean by supervised or semi-supervised is that, first of all, there are sentence level annotation. Each sentence is manually hand-aligned to their corresponding video frames. And sometimes there are even word level annotation, like each word in those sentences are manually mapped to their corresponding image region. But sentence level annotation is very common. What I'm trying to do is try to avoid these human annotation, and can we automatically exploit the temporal structure, because these protocols, they have a step-by-step temporal order. People first do step 1, then step 2, then step 3. Can we use these temporal order to automatically align these sentences with their video frames? So my algorithm is very similar to Parcel Young's 2009 work, where he is aligning the weather report commentaries with corresponding database records in the weather database. So, but basically the same idea that in the database, those are time aligned, and then we have the sequential weather report. Can we align these two using a hierarchical alignment? So let me give a very simple toy example that will, explain the main idea of our work. Say I have two sentences. First sentence is that Oliver got hit by a bludger, and sentence 2 is Harry caught the snitch and saved the day. Say you do not know about Harry Potter, you do not know about the game of Quidditch, but all you know is these two sentences, and I give you these 3 different frames and tell you that can you automatically align each sentence with their corresponding frames. Let's think about it. We have 2 different names in the text, Harry and Oliver, and in the video we have 2 different persons. First frame, one person. In the second and third frame, there is another person. So since this follows a step-by-step sequential model, sequential constraint, we can easily guess that sentence 1 is probably mapped to the frame 1, and sentence 2 is mapped to the next 2 frames. And also the name Oliver is probably representing that person, and the name Harry is representing the next 2 person. And we can do that without any direct manual segmentation. We can also guess that the word bludger is probably this shadow-like object that is going to hit this person, and the word snitch probably represents this golden small object that Harry is holding in his hand. So we can infer a lot of information from these temporal constraints without using any manual supervision.
So can you infer that because you know what hit and what means?
Exactly, that's a very good point. Like, even though I'm saying that I'm not doing any, I'm not providing it any supervision, there are lots of prior knowledge that has to go into that. It has to know, the system has to know that character names, this is a character name, and that maps to faces. And these are the objects which are like, when we have this verb hit, it's probably an object which is in motion and going to hit him. And when he caught, that means something he's going to hold in his hand. But it's challenging for now we are still struggling with the action recognitions for the verb part, because representing action is really challenging. And the other part is in the Wetlab domain, seems like objects have a lot of information compared to the action. Say like, if I'm saying pipetting, just knowing that I'm holding a pipette is a good indication that I'm doing pipetting, even if different people are doing pipetting in a slightly different way. So for alignment, we are mostly relying on the objects so far.
So you're assuming, are you making a closed world assumption with respect to the objects? You know all the objects in the domain?
Exactly. That's a very strong assumption in our work. So in the Wetlab domain, the idea is that we have the same idea. We have these sequential instructions, and we are doing hierarchical alignment at the 2 level. First, we align each sentence with their corresponding video frames. And then within each video frame, let's say I tell you that this add 500 milliliter of DI water, which is distilled water, to the labeled bottle, that aligns to this frame, we can align each noun, say water, to its water container, and bottle to its corresponding object in the video. So we are jointly doing this two-level alignment. First, we are aligning sentences with their frames, and then we are aligning each object in this video with their corresponding nouns in the sentence. Sure.
So how do you know which part of the image you should look at to find the corresponding?
Right. That's a very good question, and that's what I'm going to explain. So we had to do a lot of pre-processing on the video, and that is something using a prior knowledge and trying to simplify the video. In Wetlab domain, you can see there are lots of different objects, right? On the bench, there are too many things. What are the objects of interest? Right? So what we are doing is we are making an assumption that the objects which are usually touched by hand, they are the object of interest. So normally when I tell you that add something in the bottle, I hold the bottle and I hold, say, add water to the bottle, I hold the water, and two things are in my hand. So the main assumption is that whatever I'm touching by hand, that is the object of interest. If I don't hold anything in my hand, then it's not, I mean, we don't even consider that frame for alignment because that is not interesting. Usually nothing is going on in those frames. We also had to make some very strong assumptions because actually doing very good tracking on these Wetlab videos, it's really challenging. So what we had to do is we made some assumption, something like Oren just said. We had the closed world assumption where we know the number of objects, and we assume that each object has a different color. So then we track objects, and everything that belongs to the similar color, they're grouped as one different object. And then at the end, also in experiments, people wear a glove. So usually it's a purple glove. So we are tracking the hands using the color of the glove. So the output of this pre-processing is that we have these 3D coordinates of each different objects, which is basically a blob that has similar color. And we have 3D coordinates of the hands. So based on the distance from the threshold, based on the distance from each object with the hand and by applying a threshold, we know at each point of time which objects are touched by hand.
Do you know the names of the objects, or do you just know that it is an object?
We just know it is an object, and we know that it is a distinct object. Something like this is object 1 because it has color blue. This is object 2 because it has color green. So they're grouped by color, and we have their tracks, but we do not know their names. And the main idea is we want to figure out their name by aligning each object with we call them as blob because they're a blob in the image, and we want to align each of them with their corresponding nouns. So in the video, this is another step. So after doing this tracking, we segment the video into 1 second chunk, and each chunk, we just look at the set of objects which are touched by hand. If nothing is touched by hand, we just ignore it. In the language side, right now, the protocols that we are using, they're not very complex. So we could get away with a very simple pre-processing. We just applied a syntactic parser, and we extracted all the head nouns, and we also extracted all the verbs. And basically, each sentence is represented as a set of head nouns and verbs. But there is no deeper, there are many other problems. But in these protocols, most of the sentences were correctly parsed by a simple syntactic parser, except there was one mistake that I will tell you about. There is one instruction in the protocols was mix. So basically, it has a context from the previous sentence. Previous sentence says that add some object in the bottle. Then there is another sentence, add another object in the bottle. And then the next line is a verb saying mix. But since parser just has one sentence, and usually we don't see many imperative sentences in the standard corpus, so it learned that mix is a noun, whereas here we want mix to be a verb. But most other sentences were reasonably well parsed. So now this is our problem. We have n protocol and video pairs. In each protocol, it's a sequence of sentences where each sentence is a set of nouns and verbs. And we have n video chunks. Instead of looking at every frame, to reduce the data, we broke it down into 1 second chunk. And from each chunk, we look at just the objects which are touched by hand. So you can think of that at each time in video chunk, this is a set of objects, and these are set of nouns. and verbs, and then we have a hidden alignment, something we do not know, and we want to predict what is the alignment. For example, in this figure, it says that first frame or first chunk got aligned to sentence 1, the next two to sentence 2, and the last one to sentence 3. And this problem is very much similar to statistical machine translation and the word alignment problem, because in word alignment problem, we think that we have this, say, this is a Spanish sentence and this is an English sentence. And we have, if we represent them as a bag of words, each word has been generated from one of the English words, right? Each Spanish word, so this line says Maria was generated from the English word Mary, and for each word it's a generative model. Now, this approach has previously been used in computer vision community by Daigulo et al. And some other researchers trying to align the image words, the words in image caption with corresponding objects in the images. So assume that we have a collection of images, each with a sentence, which is a caption. We want to align each noun in the caption with corresponding object in the video. What we are doing is adding that IBM Model 1 inside a, sorry, you have a question?
So do you assume that all x's corresponds to some y? There's no missing x's?
This is a many-to-one alignment. So basically, each video frame was generated from one of the sentences. Multiple frames in my model could be generated from the same sentence, but we cannot handle the case where one frame was generated from two sentences.
But you also don't allow x's to be missing.
That kind of depends on my the kind of transitions I allow in my HMM. So I'm going to explain that. So we can skip some of the x. So I think this is the best slide to explain it. So this is an HMM model where we assume it's a generative model. Each video chunk was generated from one of the sentences. I have this block shaded. That means the nth video chunk was generated from the mth sentence. Now, the next video chunk, it has to come from some of the sentences, right? And here, this is a monotonic alignment constraint on this transition matrix that says that if you align one video to this sentence, the next video chunk either can come from the current sentence or from the next sentence. So this is a very strict alignment constraint that is not allowing you to skip any sentence. But we actually did experiments with much more flexible alignment transitions in our HMM, where we allowed it to go back to skip one sentence and go to, instead of going to xim+1, you can go to xim+2, right? You can jump multiple sentences if you want. But using that more flexible models did not work well in our experiments, because this monotonic alignment constraint is something which is helping us to learn it automatically. No, we are using it jointly. So you can think of it as I have two sets of latent variables. One latent variable is this alignment. For each video chunk, there is one alignment variable. It aligns to one of the sentences. Then it aligns one video chunk, which is a set of objects, to one sentence, which is a set of noun. Now, within that set, each object or blob, that could be generated from one of these nouns. And here, I use that as the emission probability. So IBM Model 1 became the emission probability for my HMM, and that has some additional latent variables too. So you can think of it that at the each step, I'm doing forward, backward. I'm jointly learning this expected probability of each of these alignment states, and I'm also learning the expectation that each object was generated from one of these nouns. And then in the M step, I optimize all these parameters. So it's basically two-level alignment, sentence level from the HMM, and IBM 1 gives that the objects in the video with the nouns in that sentence. And that's how it jointly figures it out. So now when we tried this first,
the difference there between machine translation is that machine translation, both sides have the ordering, and in this case, the nouns in the video are set, right?
yes. Yes, exactly. Yeah, I think this problem is very similar to the corpus alignment problem, right? I mean, what I'm trying to say is, let's say we have two parallel corpus, but we haven't aligned each sentence with its corresponding translation, but they are going in the same order. So we want to align both each English sentence with its corresponding one or two or multiple French sentences, and we also want to align the words within each French sentence with corresponding words in the English sentence. So it's like joint sentence level and word level alignment. So when we looked at this problem with this first model, we saw that there has been lots of challenges. One challenge is unobserved noun. We know there are some nouns which are not really objects, right? We have protocol, outside, these types of noun. They do not map to any object in the video. We also have out of order executions. So sometimes people specifically, actually, when they start a new step, they sometimes bring things close to them. So there are some out of order touches. They create problem, but they're for very short time. So we didn't have too much problem with that, but still this was a challenge. And then one big challenge was unmentioned object. We are generating the objects from the nouns, but let's say the sentence says, write something on the label. And then in the video, the person is holding a pen. So the object pen was actually generated because to write something, we need to use the pen. But the model do not know that correlation structure. So this was another challenge. And then finally, one of the main challenges we found is object detection. There were some small objects in the Wetlab domain, like use the tape, add the tape on the bottle. The tape is so small, sometimes it's fully occluded by hand. So often many objects we could not detect. So let's see how we try to address these challenges. The first we try to address is the unobserved noun. There are some nouns, protocol outside, that do not have any corresponding objects in the video. So we added a latent variable. For each noun, it can have some probability perhaps to be observed, or it can be something which is never observed in the video. And once we introduce these latent variables, we can jointly learn these values for latent variables. We actually looked at it and we saw that some nouns, for example, like protocol or outside, they were actually learned by the model that with high probability, they are not a physical object, they are not observed. So let's look at some of the experimental data. So we worked with 12 videos, which is like roughly 1 hour of experiment. And we tried 3 different protocols, and we tried to align each of these sentences with their corresponding video frames. So we wanted to see which part of our error is coming from the tracking error and which part of it is coming from the alignment algorithmic error. So basically what we did is we hand tracked these objects in the video, which is the manual track. You can think of it that each frame had, in each chunk, we exactly know what are the objects the person is touching. And then we tried also doing it with manual computer vision tracking and tried to see how well the alignment algorithm is performing. And what we see is even when we have very good tracking data, still the result was not that great. We could get up to 75% alignment accuracy because there are many challenges.
So I wonder how we would do if you were just manually chunking it and randomly assigning the chunks. So in other words, you have front and back constraint, right? This
Right.
is the video, I have
Yes.
X number of sentences, it has to happen in order. So if you just randomly chunk, if pixels change this much, then I'm gonna move from sentence 1 to sentence 2, sentence 3. How
Right.
does that compare?
That's a very good idea. It would be a very good baseline. We actually did not compare against that baseline. What we tried a even more simpler baseline, something that assumes that each sentence takes equal amount of time to do. So we broke it down uniformly. But that performed really bad, because if we break it down uniformly, then some steps take much longer to execute. So that did not work well. But it's a good idea that we can perhaps divide the video into shots based on how varying they are, and then try to assign them in the groups. But my assumption is that the main challenge of this problem is that if you try to use something which is deterministic, canned approach, then if you make one mistake, you assign one frame incorrectly, then all the subsequent alignment frames will go wrong, right? Say like you have broke down these shots, and in one position where you are manually assigning them, in one shot, it did not, 2 shots got aligned to the same sentence. Then all the subsequent alignments will be wrong as well.
That's the same with your method too.
My method has those absolutely, this is a challenge of any type of alignment, but in our case, we have this noun to object mapping. So it's not just a deterministic alignment, right? We have some more information. Little bit after in time, we might find another object in the video which we know that with high confidence it aligns to that noun, so then we can fix that.
For evaluation, how did you handle chunks and handle frames that weren't aligned to any step?
We did not use that in evaluation. Like,
Basically, it's just precision of the ones that are.
yes, yes, exactly. Basically, like we throw away all the chunks where nothing is touched by hand, and then we are looking at the percentage of those chunks that are aligned to the correct protocol step.
How many chunks?
So it depends from video to video. So usually it's somewhere around like 400 to 2,000 chunks in a video. So some videos have like lot more chunks, and also it depends on that how many times people are actually doing something. Some video could be much longer, but if there was a long pause, that the person, he is not sure what to do next, he took a long pause, and then all those frames are ignored in the model. And if you are interested to try it, you can look at the data and code which is available. So, okay, so right now we are not doing very good even when we have manual tracking, and we thought what could be the reason why it's not doing that well. So we thought that the main problem is we are just looking at the nouns. We are not considering verbs. And we have many cases where people say that aspirate something. Aspirate requires pipette, but in noun to object mapping, we do not have that information. Same as for write, we need to hold a pen. So we tried to incorporate verbs, and verb can be useful in many ways. First, we have co-occurrence of verbs with objects, and also we have co-occurrence of verbs with actions. For example, when we say shake or mix, that has a specific hand motion pattern, and there are prepositions. But so far, I haven't got to the preposition part yet. But the first thing we saw that incorporating these verbs and other type of overlapping relations in our generative model, it was very challenging. So one much easier approach could be trying to do a discriminative alignment, where these discriminative models, they can allow many different types of features, right? We can add these at the same time, we can have correlation between noun and object, and we can have correlation between verbs and objects, and both of these can be two different features. So this is what we tried next, is we tried to frame our alignment problem as a prediction problem, as a structured prediction problem. So in this structured prediction problem, the input is these protocol sentences, right? We have this protocol, and we are saying that let's predict the video from this protocol. And we do not know the alignment, so alignment is a latent variable. So it's framed as a supervised learning problem, where we have these sentences in the protocol, and we have video segments, and then we are trying to predict that, and at the same time jointly learn the alignment. So you can think of it just changing the HMM model to CRF. So basically it's a latent CRF model where we are trying to predict the video, which is y, given x and the length of the video, the number of chunks in the video. And we have a latent variable, which is the alignment. So basically this joint distribution is both based on the video and alignment, if we marginalize that. Now, this joint distribution, it basically is a log linear model. So when we align one within this protocol sentence, when we align one sentence with its corresponding video chunk, there will be some nouns, some verbs in the sentence, and there will be some objects in the corresponding video. So all these co-occurrences will become featured in our model. So here are the features that we used. We used the co-occurrence between each noun and blob, and also the co-occurrence of each verb with corresponding blob. That helps us to learn that, okay, write goes with pen, or aspirate goes with pen. Also, we are using some alignment path feature, which is pretty simple. One is the jump size. For monotonic alignment, it's just 0 or 1, because either we align to the current sentence or to the next sentence. And also we use some positional features that tells that, okay, the alignment should be roughly diagonal. If it goes too far from the diagonal alignment case, then we penalize those states.
So missing the distinction
Yes.
The same way that I on a pen and paper can quote here, pen and write can quote.
Right, right.
Is there any difference or?
There is one extra difference is that we have some latent variables when we are looking at the nouns and blobs. So similar to IBM Model 1, where when if say we have in the sentence we have a set of nouns and we have a set of objects, right? So there we can have all pair co-occurrences, but one object was derived from only one of the nouns, right? So we have some extra latent variables that says that the object which represents the bottle that has high probability of getting generated from the object, I mean from the noun bottle. Similarly, different objects have some probability of getting generated from different nouns. So you can think of it that, let me say, I have a bottle and a water container, and in the text I have these two nouns, bottle and water. Okay? So you can think of it, there are all four possible pairwise combination. But the model will learn with the latent variables that with high probability that bottle will get mapped to the word noun bottle, and they will get mapped to their corresponding nouns. And then other latent variables will have very low probability, so they will play a very small impact in our model. So there are some additional latent variables which I actually did not mention here for simplicity, but when we are looking at the nouns and blobs, we have some extra IBM Model 1 like latent variables as well. And then we have these mappings of verbs and blobs like correlations. So let's take a look at the result. We tried 3 different discriminative models, mainly latent CRF, and then we also tried latent structured perceptron and latent structured SVM. For our problem, the vanilla structured perceptron and structured SVM did not work well. I will not go into the details for the time, but we had to do some kind of modification to that for which it worked better, but still the best result was obtained from latent CRF. And now we were getting almost 85% accuracy for manual tracking, but for auto tracking, still lots of improvement has to be made.
So it looks like you tried multiple videos. Is that the mean accuracy?
Yes.
Was there a variance?
Yes, exactly. So the variance, since we have small amount of data, the variance is actually, it's quite high. Let me try to remember. It's something like 2 or 3. But the main thing is we looked at the statistical significance, and the difference was statistically significant for all these videos. Like for manual tracking, all the discriminative models did significantly better than the latent variable HMM model. But for the auto tracking, only the difference between this latent CRF and the HMM was significant, but from others, it was not statistically significant.
2 to 3%? 2 to 3% was the standard.
Yes, I think that, but I don't exactly remember. I think I'll have to check and then get back to you. Okay, so in summary, what we are doing is we are doing unsupervised alignment of language with video, and we tried both discriminative and generative alignment, and we saw that the discriminative model did much better compared to the generative models, and also latent CRF is working much better among the discriminative models. But what we are mainly excited about is that there are a lot more scopes of improvement. Right now, we did not consider prepositions, but if we consider prepositions, that can also become features in our discriminative model. So discriminative models are much more flexible because we can keep adding more and more features compared to the generative model. So okay, let's take a look at some of my ongoing work that we have been doing. So the first thing that right now we are working on is trying to incorporate actions, because each verb has some, correlation with different types of actions in the video. Representing action is quite challenging. So right now what we are doing is we took a simple approach. We are collecting space-time interest points from each of these video chunks, and then we are applying a hierarchical clustering. So the idea is that grouping these video chunks into different clusters, and the idea is each cluster represents one type of action, one similar type of hand motion pattern. So in some cases it works, like when we are doing shake or mix, they get grouped in one cluster, or sometimes there are lots of add examples. So the clustering was quite good for them. All those add and they got mapped to the same cluster, but there are also some noise. So we are kind of finishing up that by adding more features in the correlation of actions and verbs.
What is the size of the vocabulary of action? Just roughly,
It's intense. It's intense. I have a slide at the back with the whole statistics. I'll show you later. Okay, so I think it's close to, there are total 34 different nouns and roughly 20 verbs. So it's not too big. So the next step that we are trying to, we started working on this summer and we are getting some exciting results, is trying to apply the same idea in aligning movie scenes with their corresponding shooting scripts. The shooting script has very rich information, like it has all these character names and lots of details, what's going on in the scene. And then we have these video frames. If we could automatically align these shooting script sentences with their corresponding video frames, we can generate a very rich, first we can generate very rich training data for supervised learning. The second thing is that we can do search and retrieval on the text because it's much easier. Say you have a favorite movie, you want to see some specific scene of it, you can search that, okay, show me that scene on the text, and then you can retrieve it from the video. It's not a new problem. There has been lots of work in computer vision community in this, and all these approaches, we can break it down into two categories. One is something that uses closed subtitle or closed captions. So basically that in the script, we have character names and rich description, but in the subtitle, we do not have the character names, but we know exactly what is being said, right? And then they try to align these subtitles or closed captions with the corresponding movie script. That gives them a kind of rough alignment, and from that, they try to use different types of face classifiers for each character or action classifiers and do the alignment. The other approach is that since subtitle or closed captions are not always available, so the other approach is to look at just the co-occurrence patterns. The idea is that the same character names who co-occur in the script, their faces co-occur in the movie. So if we try to generate a graph that which names appear together from the text and generate a graph which faces appear together in the video, we can just have two different graphs and do a graph matching and try to learn which character is which face. But they do not look at the temporal order. So what we are trying to add on top of this just character name co-occurrence is that the same order in which the character names appear in the script, the same order they appear in the video.
Are shooting scripts often available for movies, and do they always correspond to the final product?
So far, normally it's basically provided by fans. So far, every video that I tried to get the shooting script, it was available, it was quite reliable, but normally it's either provided from the website of that movie, say like Harry Potter movie, they have some website, some fan website where they have all these scripts, and also for Prison Break or Buffy Vampire Slayer, in all the cases, they had these text of shooting script. The problem is sometimes they're in different format. Like in one, all the character names are caps locked. In other one, there are some HTML formats, so you have to do some type of data cleaning. But otherwise, so far, all the ones that I tried to explore, that seemed quite good. And they did correspond with the video. So this is the overall pipeline that we are looking at, that we have these. From the video, we are detecting faces. We are tracking all the faces. And then we are clustering the face tracks in a way that in each cluster, mostly the same person's face show up. And from the input script, we have this sequence of character names. So we apply the same idea, just like we are doing noun to blob mapping. We are doing a character name to their corresponding face cluster mapping. And that is helping us to figure out the alignment. So I'm going to talk about another project in a very short time, but before that, do you have any question on this part?
So when you lose track, when the scene completely changes, how do you reinitialize this?
Basically we have a color-based detector that is trying to detect everything in each frame. And then when we lose track, in maybe that object disappeared or detector failed, after some frame, it will again detect it and keep tracking. And since we have this color information that everything that has similar color belongs to the same object, even though that starts as a new track, it has a way to figure out that it belongs to the same cluster as based on the color.
Can I ask you another question about
Mhm.
the first part before I forget about it?
Mhm.
So it looks like you compared 6 different methods, right? HMM and LSS, and you said that a couple of highlighted red color methods were that you had to do some modification.
Right.
What are the knowledge or like wisdom that you learned by modifying that existing method to something else? Is it generalizable to different video aligning, or is it, do you think that it's specific to video or the problem that you had?
So far, I think it's more specific to my problem. It's not something which is very generalizable. And I can tell you the idea that we have these sentences and we are predicting the video, right? And when we are doing the discriminative structure prediction for perceptron, say, there are 2 things. When we update the weight vector, we first do force decoding, say like given the video and the text, what is the best alignment, and then we extract features. And then we do totally joint decoding, where we do not have the video. We jointly learn the alignment and try to predict the video. But the problem is, when we do not know the alignment, it's very difficult to predict the video, because you do not know how many frames to predict for each of the sentences. I don't know if it makes sense. The main idea is that when we are trying to generate the video, right, and we do not know alignment, we are trying to create the video segments from each of these sentences. And I can create any number of video segments from each of these sentences. There is no supervision for that. And that's why it was showing poor convergence behavior. And when we added some constraint decoding, like when I'm predicting the video, I will set the alignment to the force decoded alignment. Then it started to work better.
In these videos, is the camera usually just fixed or does it move around?
No, in these videos that I'm using, the cameras are fixed. But we have collected another video for another set of actually large data set, where we have actually terabytes of video, and each video is recorded from 3 different viewing angles. Those cameras are fixed as well, but not just one angle of the camera. One camera is from the front, one is from the top, and one from the side. So
I was just thinking that sometimes where the focus is on the camera is kind of like pointing or touching something with your hand.
right.
Pay attention to that.
Yes, absolutely. That's a very good point. I mean, if we had, basically it's a really challenging problem, because if, for example, in the second data set, we had some videos, some camera which is very close to hand, and then it has very good resolution, even small objects like tape. Since the person is holding right in front of it, we can detect it, right? But then often we move out, we do something else, then my hand is going totally out of that close camera angle. So then I do not have the image of the hand anymore. So I think one way of it could be, an interesting way of working on this type of domain could be using egocentric camera. There has been lots of interesting work from Georgia Tech, from Jim Ray's lab, where they tried actually the experimenter to wear him something like Google Glass. And when he is doing different tasks, naturally we actually look at that. And then he can, it's not actually Google Glass. In his case, they can actually learn the guess as well, something very similar to that. But even without those fine-grained sensors, they can automatically predict where the human guess is. So that actually helps them to predict different types of actions much better. They showed it's far better than the other camera angle.
So going back to the language side, is it correct that essentially you're using part of speech tagging, and you are using the order in which things appear in the sentence?
No.
No. So
No.
it's
Just the bag of words, bag of nouns.
Using a bag of nouns and then adding some verbs.
Right, absolutely. there are a lot more things that can be done on the language side, and that is one of my future work that I'm really excited about. There can be semantic parsing type of things. We can do anaphora resolution. There are some examples of that. There are many other things. But before that, I will just quickly.
Yeah, so following up on that, so when there's pronouns or other references and so on, you don't parse those?
Right now I'm not parsing those, but doing that will be really helpful in this domain. Not exactly. We basically started with syntactic parser. Our goal is to add many different types of syntax on top of it, syntactic features in the discriminative model, but we just couldn't move to that part yet. We have been solving other things, but that is definitely a good point. We want to use different syntactic features from language and then some kind of scene parsing idea from video, and they all can be included as features in the discriminative model. So I just wanted to say two small pointers to some of the exciting work that is going on in the area. So in the last year, there have been 2 papers which are very similar to what we have been doing. One is from Google. They're aligning YouTube cooking videos with recipe. They're using millions of cooking videos at YouTube, and they're using a speech recognizer to automatically recognize the speech in the video, and then they're aligning those speech with the corresponding recipe text. And that seemed to work really well. And this project is also, I found it really exciting, where in this year's CVPR from Tapas et al., they tried to align books with their corresponding movies. We know like Harry Potter or Game of Thrones, they're adapted from book version, right? If we can automatically align these videos or movies with their corresponding text, that can give us very rich annotation of the video. So I will just quickly talk about one more project that we are working on, which is completely different domain, but has the very similar basic idea. So we are looking at decipherment for machine translation. So far, I have been looking at the 2 views, language and video, where there is a temporal constraints, right? What if there is no temporal order? I just have a monolingual corpus in French and one monolingual corpus in English, and I want to automatically learn what are the translation between these words. In machine translation domain, the standard approach is to do word alignment, where we have sentence level alignment, right? Each sentence, and we have its corresponding translation, and we can do word alignment. Now, the problem with that is that there are many resource poor languages for which we do not have such nice large parallel corpora. For example, my language is Bengali, and often for Bengali to English, we have only very tiny parallel corpora. In many cases, we don't have any. But monolingual corpora are easy to collect, right? We can just go to web, we can download large data sets. And this idea has, in NLP community, they call it as decipherment. Let's say it's just a substitution cipher. Say in Sherlock Holmes' book, The Adventure of Dancing Man, he received this cipher text that looked like this. These are basically substitution code. Each English letter was substituted by one of these simple cartoon figures. Now the idea is how can he decipher it? Once he received enough number of letters, he could exploit some statistical similarity. He does not know exactly the plain text English, but he knows the property of general English text, right? We know the most frequent English letter is T, and then E is also highly frequent. We can then try to look at the frequency of each of these characters and their frequency of corresponding English letters and do the decipherment. The same idea is being exploited in NLP domain, where people are trying to do decipherment, where they say that, okay, this is, we know the language model of English, we have some French, we do not know what is their corresponding exact English translation, but since we know the n-gram language model for English, we can think that, okay, this has been this French sentence, each French sentence was generated from some English sentence that we do not know. So this is a latent space. And then they try to automatically learn these translations as emission probability. So this is the translation model.
This work assumes some sort of monotonicity between the 2 languages?
Yes. The idea is that the assumption is words usually appear in the same order, right? I mean,
so it works for like Japanese.
Exactly. It wouldn't work for Japanese people. are trying to do something else for those cases, they would use not direct n-gram, instead they would use dependency n-gram, like dependency bigrams. So then even though their word order changed, the dependency order hopefully is still intact. So okay, I will just quickly say, so there has been another interesting work from 2008, which is almost the same idea. It wants to learn the word level translation from monolingual corpora, and it has been done by Arya Hagigi, I think. Is he here? I guess I saw on the website. So it's actually his work, and what he did is he used these types of orthographic features between languages, because English and French or English or Spanish, they are actually derived from same root often, or there are lots of overlap. So they use these types of syntactic orthographic features and then did something which is similar to decipherment, but not exactly. So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to combine these two approaches by using both orthographic features and the decipherment idea. And we just replaced the HMM standard model with a Markov random field. So then we could incorporate orthographic features in it. But the challenge was that MRF, it's very difficult to train because we have to, estimate the partition function. And we tried to solve it using different types of MCMC sampling. I will not go into too much detail, but what our experiment shows that by incorporating orthographic features, we are significantly improving the translation accuracy from monolingual corpora compared to the state-of-the-art baseline. And we tried these different types of sampling, GIP sampling, independent metropolis hastings, and contrastive divergence. So in accuracy-wise, GIP sampling seemed to work slightly better, but we prefer to use contrastive divergence because it's really fast, much, much faster. And it's not published yet, but the initial version is on archive if you're interested to take a look at it. So I'm over the time, so I will just finish my talk. So we are now looking at huge amount of information, and often they're in multiple views and multiple modalities, and collecting supervision from these multimodal data is very challenging. And what my interest is basically is try to combine these multiple views and multimodality and use that as a source of weak supervision. Last week I was in a retreat in ISTCPC, and there I saw a very nice work from Jeff Bilm's group where they were doing something like video summarization. And the work was to automatically summarize a video and try to figure out interesting segments. But that was based on only video. It didn't take into account other modalities. But if we have sports commentary, we have tweets of people about exciting moment in the video and incorporate those information, we can actually use those semantics and try to find the, say, sports video highlights which actually aligns with our understanding of sports. And we can look at video lectures, textbook, and other type of views and try to combine it. I saw, here at AI2, you have a very exciting project like Semantic Scholar, and there you have all these different papers on the same topic, and if we can align them or figure out what are the commonality and where one paper is different from the other, that could be exciting. And in the language side, right now I only looked at very simple, small number of protocols, and we just do very simple basic parsing. So there are a lot of more things that we can do. There are rich literature of semantic parsing, but they are usually supervised or semi-supervised. My idea is that can we incorporate our temporal alignment in that domain, and if we can do without less amount of supervision, and then these things like anaphora resolution, and we can also use publicly available databases or knowledge base. So I think basically that's all. I will thank my collaborators, my professors and fellow grad students from Rochester, and thank you all for your attention.